You're listening to Being Autistic. I'm your host, Shelly, and I am a 50-year-old woman sharing my experiences about what it's like to grow up knowing I was different but not knowing why, how I learned I was on the autism spectrum, and what it's like to be autistic. Hello, everyone. In today's episode, this week's episode, I should say, I'm going to talk about ABA. This is known as Applied Behavior Analysis Therapy, and this is a very controversial subject. So this episode is going to be from an autistic person's perspective, and from what I'm learning, most autistic people share this perspective. And so this is going to be a contrast perspective from mostly parents of autistic children. So let's go back in history and explain how this became a thing. So there was a psychologist. I can't remember what year he was around, but it was decades ago. His name was Ivar Lovaas, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's spelled Ivar, and then the last name is Lova. It's either AAS or ASS, but he was one of the original psychologists that thought that you could take an autistic child and basically force them to be neurotypical. And what he did was he used really harsh techniques like ignoring a child, withholding affection, not giving them food, giving them punishments. And I've even heard that he sometimes used electric shocks. So this sounds horrible, and it is horrible. And I also learned, I've been recently reading the book called Neurotribes by Steve Silberman. And in this book, he goes really, really in depth with this whole thing and this guy. And basically, it was found that, I guess they did studies on adults that had this done to them as children, and apparently it caused PTSD in most of them. And I think one of them even committed suicide, people from the study. So there's nothing good about this from the perspective of the person themselves, because you're basically forcing change. And from the perspective of a parent of a child, it sounds good, because the parent is like, I don't like that my child doesn't listen to me, or I can't deal with them. So they're ready to do whatever it takes. And there's a lot of people that in the autistic community that are completely on board with getting rid of this and not supporting it at all, because there's so many facets of this. Like, there's the perspective that you are made the way you are on purpose. Like, this is the way your brain is, and you can't change how your brain formed. In the fact that, how autism is a neurotype. It's basically the same thing as being left-handed. Your brain works differently. It expresses itself differently, and it kind of, I don't want to say controls, but it heavily influences everything about you. And so imagine a child going through ABA treatment and basically being punished for not being normal. And so the other thing with this guy, this Lovaas guy, he also coincidentally was the same person that invented gay conversion therapy, which is basically what it sounds like, trying to make gay children straight. And, there's more and more people nowadays are expanding their sexual orientation. It's just becoming more open, more accepted. And so there's going to be more and more people that, if they only knew that this same guy was doing this, there actually is a petition. There's a petition to ban autism conversion therapy. If you want to check it out, it's at u.leadnow.ca, and then /petitions/ ban autism conversion therapy. But if you don't want to go through all of that, you can just search ban autism conversion therapy and you should be able to find it. So this is something that I feel really strongly about, especially after going through talk therapy. So I'm going to kind of venture now into what I think about the mental health therapy system, at least in America. It's very similar to the medical system, where they just want to change you and they want to give you medication to control the condition that you have. And when it comes to talk therapy, I've learned, I've been to 4 different therapists now. And I learned that their main goal is to get you to think differently and to change your mindset. And it doesn't work with autistic people. I'm really starting to believe that mental health therapy is only for people that have separate, it's basically for neurotypical people, really. But, people that feel like they don't have anyone to talk to or anyone to express their feelings to, because really when it comes to therapy, that's all you're doing is talking. It's not anything like somatic healing, which is the body, the energy body. So I'm really going through a lot of processing this whole thing, because I just switched to a new therapist because she's the only one around here that is familiar with autism, but she unfortunately does do ABA therapy with children, and apparently she doesn't think that it works on adults, which is true because it doesn't. But I don't like the fact that she believes that this works for children. Now, of course, there's going to be children out there that it does work for, but I'm putting work in quotes because, like this study showed, that most of the kids that went through this came out with PTSD. And it just sounds like torture. And for anybody that's listening, even if you're not autistic, or if you don't even know that you're autistic, imagine going to a facility where a doctor that doesn't know you is going to basically force you to act a different way, force you to speak in a way that might not be comfortable for you, force you to do everything different, because the autistic brain goes about everything differently. And this covers all aspects of life, social interactions, work, sensory issues, routine, daily living, just the ways that we think and the ways that we interact with the world and the ways that our brains attach to things, like when it comes to special interests. We're either all or nothing when it comes to doing things. So it covers so many parts of our life. And the reason why I'm making this episode specifically is because yesterday I just had a bad experience with the therapy that I went to, and it just reminded me of ABA and how, it's all about changing your mindset and changing the way you think. But like I said, the autistic brain is not like a typical brain. And so I think mental health therapy is not as effective for people with autism. So going back to ABA, this is something that I believe it deserves more attention, and it is getting more attention. Like, I just found out about this petition, and I know from talking to so many autistic people, I talk to so many autistic people every single day on Facebook and on Reddit, and I even have a couple friends that are autistic, and I don't know a single one of them that is for ABA therapy. So this is something that deserves some more attention, and I'm hoping to spread the word about it a little bit, coming from an autistic person's perspective and not coming from a parent trying to keep my child under control. I think there's alternative ways to deal with it rather than forcing it. And if you are in the LBGQ community, then surely you also agree that you can't change your social or your sexual orientation. That's a brain thing. That's how your brain works. And same with autism. And these are two very similar in some ways conditions. Similar in that it makes us neurodivergent. It makes us different from most people. So yeah, it's all the same thing. You know, nobody that's different wants to be forced to be normal. And when I say normal, I mean neurotypical. Because there's very many different ways that normal can be. Because is there really a normal? Everybody's got issues. So, you know, it's just a matter of realizing that you either have a neurotypical brain or a neurodivergent brain. And many people that are autistic are also in the LBGQ community, and T, and all the other words that go along with it. It's hard for me to keep up with all the words, the letters I should say, because if I'm not looking at it, I can't say it, and it seems like they're always adding new ones, you know, so basically it's all just different expressions of your uniqueness that is not fitting into a box that society wants. So if you know anything about the way society works, they're not too friendly with people that don't fit into the box. And that's where this conversion therapy and ABA came from. And I just feel very, very strongly about this. This is something that bothers me. It bothered me even before I knew I was autistic, because I heard about this gay conversion therapy and I'm like, oh my God, when is the world going to finally accept that everybody is different and there are people that don't fall into the majority? So I'm going to end this episode quickly here. I'm going to say that if you are going to therapy as an autistic person, I would really I don't know what word to put here, but like think about why you're going to therapy in the first place. Do you want them to alter your thinking? Do you want someone to talk you into changing your mindset? Because in some ways that's probably okay if it's not anything too harsh, but like if somebody believes that they are not controlled, but they are, okay, think of it like this, a computer. There are two basically different kinds of computer. There's the regular PC, the Windows PC, and then there's the Mac, which is a different operating system. And our brains, basically the neurotypical and the neurodivergent, are two different operating systems. And you cannot make one work like the other. You just can't. That is not how they were designed. So the mental health therapy system, at least in America, is designed to fit you into a box and try to get you to change to fit into that box. So if you are going to therapy, please consider that maybe your therapist is not on board with, you know, working with you. They're working with what they have been taught to do with people. And it's not on an individual basis, because they're going to take every one of their clients and try to change how they are thinking. So it's kind of like you have to be your own self-advocate when it comes to this. So if you are a parent listening to this, which most likely there will be some, because it's mostly parents that look into ABA anyway, because it's really about making the child grow up typical. So I would say that try to, you know, learn about ABA, learn about this Lovaas guy. It's horrible. You know, the things that he said about autistic children is horrible. He said that I'm going to find the quote here. This is a literal quote of what this man said. You start pretty much from scratch when you work with an autistic child. You have a person in the physical sense, but they are not people in the psychological sense. One way to look at the job of helping autistic kids is to see it as a matter of constructing a person. You have the raw materials, but you have to build the person. End quote. Now, I don't know how anybody can see what he's trying to do and think it's a good thing. He is trying to change the child. He doesn't think that they're even a person. And that's just blows my mind. Because if anyone has autism and grows up without ABA, they are obviously a person. We are people. We are not broken. We are different. And so what he didn't realize was that autistic children are just different people, but they are people. So if you are a parent listening to this, please research ABA and the history of it. Get yourself a copy of Neurotribes by Steve Silberman, and that explains a lot. And that really goes into depth as well with Dr. Hans Asperger, which was the one who, discovered Asperger's syndrome, which they don't use by that name anymore because he had ties to the Nazi group of, the Nazi regime. And so basically they treated autistic people like they were broken, like they were not real people. And yeah, so I'm doing my part to help spread awareness. If you are a parent of an autistic child, please research ABA and try to find some therapists that can work with you on natural ways of managing it. And it's really all about keeping the child's environment in a way that it fits in with their needs. It's very easy to keep an autistic person happy. I shouldn't say very easy, because in the world we're living in, it's so hard because we have to deal with all the things that we hate. And there's so many things. But yeah, I kind of rambling a little bit here, and my point is basically, please research ABA, because I'm not quite the expert at every detail about it. I know who started it. I know what he said. I know what effect it has on children. And I know that it was connected to the gay conversion therapy, which I can't think of a single person that cares about children that would ever support that. So that's it for this episode. I hope this was helpful, and thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next week's episode.